Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a massive regulatory event. We're looking at a shakeup that's really reshaping the entire mobile duopoly in Brazil, which is one of the world's largest emerging markets.
It is. What we're really seeing here is Apple's official, and I'd say very controlled retreat from its famous walled garden model, this time in Latin America.
Controlled retreat. I like that.
Yeah, we're analyzing the immediate commercial fallout of an antitrust settlement that cracks open the whole iOS ecosystem. And the key takeaway right up front is that this isn't just about Brazil.
Okay.
This is Apple's global blueprint for compliance. It shows us exactly how they plan to turn what looks like a regulatory defeat into, well, a new kind of monetization.
All right, let's get right into it then. For anyone who missed the headlines, what is the core event here? Apple's been in a legal fight for 3 years. What's the final result?
The result is a settlement. Apple has formalized an agreement with Brazil's national competition regulator. That's the Administrative Council for Economic Defense, or Cade, as it's known.
Cade. Got it. So they're the country's main antitrust watchdog.
Exactly. And they've been very, very focused on this.
So what did Cade actually force Apple to do? What's the big change on the ground?
The fundamental change is that Apple has to allow two things on iOS devices in Brazil. First, alternative app distribution channels.
Meaning third-party app stores?
Precisely. And second, they have to allow external payment systems to operate within apps. So this just blows a huge hole in the exclusivity of the App Store and that mandatory in-app purchase system.
We know Apple doesn't like to move quickly. So what's the timeline here? And, what happens if they don't comply?
They have 105 days. That's it. So the deadline is going to be right around April 2026. If they fail to meet that, they're looking at some pretty significant escalating fines of up to $150 million.
So 150 million raise. Okay, so that's what, Mo, about 27.1 million US dollars?
Roughly, yeah.
For me, that's a ton of money. But let's be honest, for a company like Ada, $27 million is basically pocket change. So why should we even care about that number?
That's the crucial point. The fine itself is almost irrelevant to their balance sheet. What is relevant is the precedent. By signing this now, Apple gets to make a controlled retreat.
They get to set the terms.
They get to set the terms, exactly. They're dictating how they will comply, specifically the new fee structure we're about to get into, before Brazil passes much tougher legislation. They're buying certainty now to avoid a world of hurt later.
That's a great way to frame it. Okay, so let's dig into the history. This didn't just happen overnight. The case started back in 2022, and it had a very powerful player behind it.
It did. It was driven by the Latin American e-commerce and fintech giant, Mercado Libre, them, ticker MELI. They were the main complainant here, arguing Apple was just stifling competition.
Now, most of these big global cases we follow, Epic Games in the US, the EU complaints, they focus on the 30% cut and the anti-steering rules. What made this Brazilian case so different?
It was unique because it focused on the obstruction of digital marketplaces inside of other apps. Mercado Libre wasn't just fighting about payment fees.
Oh, interesting.
They were trying to build a kind of digital mall inside their own app. Specifically, they had this Meli Plus Level 6 loyalty program, which bundled things like a free Disney Plus subscription. Apple's rules basically said, nope, you can't do that.
So it wasn't just about Apple collecting a tax on the transaction. They were actively stopping MELI from becoming a rival gatekeeper for digital subscriptions in Latin America.
You've got it. Cade saw that. They realized this was about preventing a competitor from innovating and consolidating a market. It was about locking users into Apple's system for everything.
And that gets to Cade's whole approach, which seemed really sophisticated. The commissioner, Victor Fernandez, he was very clear that Apple holds a monopoly on the iOS operating system.
Right, and their economic analysis was different. They used what they called an ecosystemic approach. Instead of just looking at the App Store in a vacuum, they looked at the whole Apple ecosystem as one unit.
And they found Apple was using two main strategies.
Two key strategies, yeah. The first, they called offensive leverage. That's Apple using its OS monopoly, the power of the iPhone, to extend its dominance into other markets, like payments or content distribution.
And the second one?
Defensive leverage. Those are all the rules and restrictions that stop developers from creating their own distribution channels that might compete with the App Store. It's the moat they built around the castle. Cade knew you had to address both.
Now, Apple's defense, everywhere in the world, always comes back to two words: security and privacy. Did Cade buy that argument?
Not at all. They rejected it categorically. Cade pointed out that Apple already makes huge exceptions.
Right, for apps selling physical goods like Amazon or Uber.
Exactly, or reader apps. The regulator basically asked, if security is so critical, why do these massive exceptions exist without any evidence of major security problems? The argument it fell apart under scrutiny.
So Brazil isn't just following the EU's Digital Markets Act. They're really forging their own path here.
They are. They're positioning themselves as a leader in what's called ex-ante regulation. Think of it as proactive rules to prevent problems before they happen. They have their own Brazilian DMA bill in the works.
And this settlement is Apple trying to get ahead of that.
It's Apple mitigating that risk. They're offering a concession that they designed themselves now to avoid something much worse later.
Which is the perfect pivot. If they were forced to retreat legally, how did Apple manage to turn this into a controlled financial surrender? Let's talk about the money. Services just crossed $100 billion a year. How do they protect those margins?
They replaced the physical wall with a very sophisticated financial toll booth. This is their compliance with monetization strategy, and Cade approved it. This new fee structure is the model they're going to use everywhere.
Okay, walk us through these new fee tiers. I'm going to go slowly here because this is where it gets complicated.
Sure. So we have 4 tiers now. First, if a developer uses an alternative app store, a totally separate marketplace, Apple will charge a 5% core technology commission, or CTC.
A core technology commission. So that's a fee just for the privilege of existing on iOS, even if Apple doesn't process the payment.
That's it. It's their replacement for the moat. It's an IP and platform usage fee.
Okay, what's tier 2?
Tier 2 is the old way, a standard app store in-app purchases. Those commissions stay high, 25% or 10% for the smaller guys. That's the default high-cost option.
Right. Now for the new stuff, what about external payments?
Okay, tier 3. If a developer puts a clickable button or a link that redirects to an external payment system, say Mercado Pago's website,
Right.
Apple will charge a reduced 15% fee on that transaction. This is the key incentive. You save a lot compared to the standard rate, but Apple still gets a nice cut.
So Apple is saying, sure, you can leave, but you still have to pay us a facilitation fee. That's the arbitrage opportunity for Spotify or Epic.
Absolutely. It creates a commercial pressure valve. And then there's the last tier, number 4. If you just use static text, no link, no button, just words that say, go to our website to save money, Apple charges no fee.
But that introduces friction. You're making the user manually type in a web address.
And they know most people won't. They'll just click the convenient button and pay the 15%. It's a brilliant bit of behavioral economics.
It really is. So who are the clear winners here right away?
Oh, the number 1 winner is Mercado Libre, MELI, hands down. They started this fight, and now they can integrate Mercado Pago, their massive fintech arm, directly into the iOS ecosystem. It's a straight shot to their bottom line.
And other big developers, I mentioned?
For sure. Anyone with a big subscription base can now try to capture more margin by shifting users to direct web payments.
You mentioned this Brazilian model, especially that 5% CTC, is the global blueprint. Why is this specific structure so important for Apple?
Because they need a standard playbook. You have different rules in South Korea, Japan, the EU. It's a mess. The CTC lets Apple argue to any regulator, look, we gave up exclusivity, but we still deserve to be paid for our IP and our platform.
It sets a precedent.
Powerful one. If Brazil accepts it, it's much harder for the next country to say no.
And this has to be putting immense pressure on the other half of the duopoly, Alphabet.
Oh, without a doubt. Cade is very consistent. Once they set a rule for one gatekeeper, they almost always apply it to the other. Google should be getting ready for an identical mandate in Brazil very soon.
So if the whole model is changing, what's the key metric investors need to be watching now? It's not just about iPhone sales anymore.
It's not. The focus has to shift to efficiency. You need to track services revenue per user in these regulated markets. Apple's services division has a gross margin of 75.6%.
Staggering number.
It's monopoly-level pricing. The big question is, can they prove that the 5% CTC and the 15% redirect fee are enough to keep that margin from contracting? That is the entire financial battle from here on out.
The ultimate test of their financial engineering. Okay, let's pause here. We have to remind everyone listening that we are analysts. This is for discussion and entertainment.
Absolutely. This is not financial advice, but when you look at the situation, with the asymmetric risk where one company basically created the regulation that benefits them, it does set up a pretty compelling speculative trade.
All right, lay it out for us. The outrageous but plausible trade idea.
The thesis is this. The market is underestimating the immediate revenue upside for Mercado Libre's fintech arm, Mercado Pago. They just got a golden ticket to the high-value iOS user base. At the same time, Apple's implementation risk is high. That 5% CTC is complex and could still face pushback, threatening those massive services margins.
Okay, so how would you actually trade that idea?
It's a regulatory pair trade. You go long Mercado Libre MELI common stock, and you fund it with a short position on Apple AAPL call options. But you're not betting against the iPhone. You're targeting options that would pay out if services gross margins start to contract.
So the logic is that MELI has a clear, immediate tailwind that they engineered themselves.
Correct. They won the fight, and now they collect the prize. Apple, on the other hand, has to prove their new financial toll booth can actually hold up globally and keep margins above 75%. You're betting on that power shift in Latin America.
A fascinating way to look at the fallout. Okay, let's bring it all home. Give us the core story one last time.
Apple made a controlled concession in Brazil. They retreated from the walled garden, but in doing so, they got approval for a new, complex financial framework, the Core Technology Commission, designed to protect their high-margin services revenue from being eroded by regulators around the world.
So what's the one thing our listeners should be watching for?
Watch that April 2026 deadline, and critically, watch the adoption rate and the reception of that 5% CTC. The physical wall is coming down, but the financial toll booth is officially open for business.
Which leaves a final thought for all of you. Think about this. How does managing all this fragmentation, different rules in the EU, different fees in Brazil, court orders in the US, how does that impact Apple's operational complexity? Can its single monolithic argument about security and privacy really hold up when it's applying all these different standards in different markets? The cost of running the App Store just went way up, even if the fine was small. Think about that. We'll talk to you next time.